This is the right one, right?
Thank you so much.
It says there's only one participant, but
That's okay. Do you want me to double check?
how do you double check?
We'll just. It's already recording, so you're good. I just want to know if you pressed it from here.
Yep.
Okay, so then you should be good.
So we're good to go?
Yeah, they'll hopefully join on.
Perfect.
Should be good.
Okay, good morning to everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Wow, we start a new book this week. Sefer Shmot. I have to tell you, this is such a hard parsha to decide what are you going to talk about. My goodness, there's so many things to talk about in this week's parsha, but I wanted to focus on one little part of the parsha. And if you look at your source sheet, does everybody have one? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you look at your source sheet, there's a very famous. I think this is appropriate for Midreshet Beirot Batayin, right? Women's seminary. Chazal made a very, very interesting, it was the name of Rabbi Akiva, Darash Rabbi Akiva, source number 1. Bischar nashim tzadkaniyot shayu beoto hador nigalu Yisrael miMitzrayim, a very famous quote of the rabbis, that because of righteous women, the Jewish people merited to be taken out of Egypt because of the merit of righteous women. Now, the Torah, Chazal don't tell us. There's many, many women in the book of Shmot. Certainly at the beginning, right? We have. Are
you describing a different? Did you end up choosing something else than what you're describing?
Did I give the wrong source sheet?
It's okay. We're still. That just proves your point that there's so much to learn. This one is about how it was a Jewish child. How Bhakti opened it up and it was a Jewish child.
Let me see that source sheet.
It's okay. We can still hear.
It could be that it starts from another source here. I think you're going to see it. I'm sorry. So this first source I didn't put on your source sheet. Okay.
That's okay.
So you'll trust me that it's in there. It's the Gemara and Masechet Sotah if you want to check it. But the Gemara doesn't tell us which women are these righteous women. So we're going to be a little off, by the way, on the numbers of the sources, because that for me that's number 1. You'll have a different number 1. In any case, there's Yocheved, the mother of Moshe Rabbeinu, there's Shifra, there's Pua, there's Miriam. There's so many women that this could be talking about. By the way, there was yesterday I saw this Orach Chaim that blew me away from Parashat Vayigash. In Parashat Vayigash, it talks about Yaakov coming down to Mitzrayim, right? When he finds out that Yosef is alive, so he takes the family now and he takes them to Mitzrayim, and there's a pasuk in Parashat Vayigash that mentions that he takes his sons and their sons, right? And it says that he brought them ito leMitzrayim, right? And then it says his daughters and their daughters, and it says hevi itam. It uses the word he brought with them. In other words, with the sons it says they came along with him, and with the daughters it says he brought them with him. Comes along the Orach Chaim and he says something very interesting. He says, because there was one group of Jews, when Yaakov left the land of Israel to go to Egypt to see his son Yosef, says the Orach Chaim, there was one group that went willingly. They said, yeah, let's go. It's probably nice in Egypt. Maybe they have nice weather there, whatever, right? That was the sons. So it doesn't use the word hevi, right? The word hevi means he literally had to bring them. But by the daughters, it says that he had to bring them, says the Orach Chaim, they didn't want to go. The daughters didn't want to leave Eretz Yisrael. They didn't want to leave the land of Israel. They didn't want to go to all of the defilement and idolatry and everything that was going on in Egypt, right? And so there's something very special that our rabbi saw in, first of all, the women's connection to the land of Israel, but more than anything, how in Egypt they were like the main kind of impetus to get the Jewish people out of Egypt. And if you look at the words of Chazal, you will see how true this is. So, for example, there's a midrash. I don't know if I have it over here, but there's a midrash that says that the men, because of all the hard labor, they wanted to divorce their wives. They didn't want to have children. They didn't want to bring children into the world. They said, what are we going to bring children into the world if they're just going to be slaves in Egypt? So it says that actually Miriam went to Amram, to her father, and she says, you're worse than Paro. Why are you worse than Paro? Because Paro only made a decree against the boys. He said, Kol ben hayilod hayora tashlichu. Paro said, only the boys have to die. But you, if you divorce your wives, you're going to put everybody to death. There won't be no boys and no girls. There won't be any Jewish people. And so it says that the women, they didn't divorce their wives, and the women would entice their husbands, and they would have children, and they would continue. So there's this case to be made for the power of the women in Mitzrayim. By the way, yeah, go ahead.
I think it says that in order to seduce their husbands, they would use the mirror. They would go into the field, and they would use the same mirror that later on they're going to then donate towards the
kior.
Towards what they were in the future.
The wash
when
basin.
The washing things.
The wash basin of the Beit HaMikdash.
Or whatever, so the Beit HaMikdash. That same mirror is the mirror that the women, righteous women in Egypt used to make themselves pretty to then go and seduce their husbands.
Yeah.
Because their husbands thought better not to be with their wives.
And the mirrors in those days, the mirrors were made out of copper. They were copper mirrors. So because if you take copper and you really shine it, you can actually see your reflection. And so so it says that. And just think about the symbolism of the fact that afterwards, when Moshe Rabbeinu now has to decide, what copper are we going to use to make the wash basin, which was made out of copper in the Beit HaMikdash? Which mirrors? What copper are we going to use? Right. So they used dafka, the copper that the women used, right, to entice their husbands. I mean, that's a crazy thing. By the way, there's a beautiful Rashi over there. That Rashi says that Moshe Rabbeinu actually was surprised when Hashem told him to use that copper. He says this copper was used for the Yetzer Hara, right? Was used for the Yetzer Hara for the women, right? So says Hashem, no, that Yetzer Hara was a good thing, right? In other words, you've got to, and so that was it. By the way, so there's a big case to be made. By the way, in the story of the spies, what does it say over there? Shlach lecha anashim, right? It says send for yourself anashim, which means men. So there's a kli akar over there that says that, you know what Moshe Rabbeinu's mistake was when he sent 12 spies to scout out the land of Israel? His mistake was that he sent 12 men. Had he sent 12 women, there would never have been a sin of the spies. Because the women, they love Eretz Yisrael. The daughters, he brings the daughters of Tzlofchad, right? They want a nachala. They say, we want a piece of the land. What? Just because my father didn't have sons, we're not going to get a piece of the land of Eretz Yisrael, right? So the Kli Akar says that was if Moshe Rabbeinu had sent women to scout out the land of Israel, there would have been no. By the way, think about that. There would have been no 40 years, right? There's no. In other words, it would have been Jewish history would have been very different had that happened, right? Okay. In any case, let's get back to our discussion over here. So there are many women who could fall under this category of righteous women who saved the Jewish people from Egypt. It could be Miriam, it could be Yocheved, it could be Shifra, it could be Pua, it could be many. But I want to concentrate on one, and that is the daughter of Paro. She doesn't get a lot of attention, right? But she should. And so I wanted to concentrate on her. And there's a very interesting, so again, what's the story? The storyline is that Moshe's real mother, right, she knows there's a danger in raising this child, and so therefore she puts him in a little basket, right, and the basket now goes down the river, right, and who finds him is the daughter of Paro. And there's this back and forth between the daughter of Paro and the mother, the real mother, right? The daughter of Paro gives the baby to the real mother to breastfeed and so on. And there's a really interesting question: who raises Moshe? During those formative years of the child's life, of Moshe Rabbeinu, the Redeemer's life, right? Who raises him? In other words, where does he get his values from, right? Because those years are very, very important. If you look at source number 2, source number 1. Actually, it is number 1 on mine. I don't know, I got confused over here. So we're going to be on the same page over here. So if you look at source number 1 on your sheet, let's just have a look and see. Okay, so it says like this. This is the story of the daughter of Paro finding Moshe Rabbeinu. It says, "Vatiftach vatireu hayeled." She opens the ark and she sees the child. V'nei nar bochen. He's crying. Of course he's crying. Vatachmol alav. She has compassion on him. Vatomer miyaldei ivrim zeh. She says he is a child of the Hebrews, which is obvious. Who else would have sent their son down the river, right? Vatomer achoto el bat Paro. So his sister, remember Miriam was in the bulrushes following to see where the teva would go. So now when the daughter of Paro finds the child, she says, well, should I go get a woman to breastfeed the child, right? Mina Ivriot, from the Jewish women, Vatenek lach et hayeled, and she will breastfeed the child. Vatomer la bat Paro lechi, so the daughter of Paro says, yes, go, find me this woman. Vatelech alma vatikrat em hayeled, and she goes, and of course she finds the mother of the child, Yochevet, right? Vatomer la bat Paro, and bat Paro says, Helichi et hayeled hazeh ve'nikiu li, take this child and breastfeed him. So there's a very interesting interplay here. Both women have access to Moshe, right? In other words, Bat Paro now has claimed him, right? I found him. But she also now gives him to the real mother, who's going to also feed him. Ve'ten lach et tzcharech, and I will reward you. Vatikach haisha yeled vatenikeu, the woman takes the child and she breastfeeds him. Vayigdal hayeled, now the child grows. So we're not talking anymore about a 2-month-old baby. We're talking about a child who vayigdal means that he is now grown. He can learn. He can now be affected. In other words, he's starting to shape his personality. Right? So now he grows up, and she returns him to Bat Paro. So during those formative years, the mother actually does have access and a little bit of, she's connected to this child, right? But she returns him Vayila leben. But then it says that he becomes what? A son to the daughter of Paro. So we have these two women who are kind of vying for the motherhood of this little baby, this child whose name is Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Let's just finish. Vatikra shemo Moshe. Now, who gives him the name? The daughter of Paro is the one who actually names Moshe Rabbeinu. Vatikra shemo Moshe. She calls him Moshe. Vatomer kimin hamayim meshitihu, because I drew him out of the water. So the word Moshe. So this is important, by the way. The word Moshe has many different meanings, but one of the meanings of the word Moshe is mishitihu. I drew him out of the water. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, no, just that it was so interesting. Me and Sophie were learning this yesterday. We were learning the Chumash yesterday, just like basic Chumash and Rashi. But it was interesting, like a few things. First of all, I was surprised how fast, like we always learn the stories with so much detail and all that, and then we did it in Chumash, and like in one paragraph, Moshe's born. The next paragraph, he's already being told, like, it's so crazy, and you know what I mean? And
yes.
but like Paro's daughter's coming. I was so surprised. I knew so many midrashim or things to add that I thought for sure would be in the pasuk that were not.
Not in there.
Like even the fact that Amram and Yocheved were going to get divorced. All these stuff that to me it's like basic part of the story.
Yes.
It's like not there. Yeah. But
by the way, I just wanted to interject for a second because I remember I had the privilege of studying with Nechama Leibovich for quite a number of years, and she was like really one of the big scholars in Tanakh, and she made a very interesting point, and she says that we have to be very careful as we learn, especially during our, the beginning of our study of Tanakh and Torah. We have to be very, very careful to first of all know the story, and then afterwards learn the midrashim, because what tends to happen a lot of times, and I see this a lot, is that people sometimes don't have a distinction between what's actually written and what actually are the midrashim, right? And then we kind of think the midrash is actually like what, that's written, right?
Why is it a problem if we?
It's not a problem. We need to have midrash to understand, but we have to first just understand the text itself, right? We need to know that this is the text, this is midrash, right? And what's the pshat of the story. And then we learn it on different levels, and then we can understand, what we understand the story better.
Yeah. Anyways, it was so interesting.
You were going to say something else. Yeah,
I was just going to say that. So we were discussing part of it. We read a little bit more because it was so fast that then Moshe's in the palace, and he ends up being. It says like he does relate to the Jews, and he goes back to his people and all that. And we were literally discussing what you're discussing, like. It's so interesting because, it's just interesting because if he was only raised by his mother, let's say for the first 3 years of his life, and then he goes to the palace for so many years, it's impressive that he's still able to so connect to the Jewish people, and it says that he's so loyal to the point that he like defends them and does them and all these things.
Yes,
if
absolutely.
If he was really raised as a
so let's take that point because it doesn't tell us. In other words, so we have, and by the way, this is what the Abarvanel says. The Abarvanel says that it's very significant that it says that the child grew and he was with the mother during formative years, and then only afterwards she gives the child back to the daughter of Paro, who then also raises him. Okay, so what we don't have in the story, this is Pshat. Okay, this is the story. Now we have to try to understand and fill in the blanks. What exactly happened during those years that he was being raised and he's in his mother's home, and what did he see? And did that shape him? Did that allow him to be shaped as an individual, as the future redeemer of the Jewish people? Is there any clues in the text? I would like to suggest that there is one. And that is, just before he is born, there's a very troubling passage. So everybody look at source number 4. I don't know what you have it over there. I'm so sorry. But it's Shmot Aleph, Shmot chapter 1, verses 15 through 22. Yeah?
No, guys,
is that the second source? Okay, for me it's 4, but okay, so it's source number, I must have copied the wrong source sheet. Okay, so here's what it says. Vayomer melech Mitzrayim lamiyalodot haivriot. And the king, does everybody have that? You know what, give me one of the source sheets so that I'll be able to also, and then I can tell you which one it is. Yeah, it's source number 2. So it says, Vayomer melech Mitzrayim lamiyalodot haivriot. And the king of Egypt says to the midwives, the Jewish midwives, Asher Shem Achad Shifra v'Shem Hashanit Puah. One is Shifra and one is Puah. And by the way, Chazal tell us that they were actually Yocheved and Miriam. Right? Okay. Vayomer beyaletchem et haivriot uritem ot avnaim im ben hu vamitem oto. And you will see that when these women give birth on the birthing stones, if it's a boy, throw him into the river. You will put him to death. Ve'im bati v'chaya. And if she's a daughter, then let her live. Vatiren hamyaladot et ha'irain. But the miyaladot, the midwives, feared God. How could they put a Jewish child to death? Ve'lo asu kasher dibar lemelech Mitzrayim v'techayena ta'yiladim. They didn't do as the king of Egypt says. They kept the Jewish children alive. Vayikra melech Mitzrayim lamyaladot. And the king of Egypt calls the midwives. Vayomer lahem. And he says to them, Madu asitem adavar hazeh. Why did you do such a thing? V'techayena ta'yiladim. I told you explicitly, put them to death, and you're keeping them alive. Why did you do such a thing? V'tomarna miyaladot el Paro. So the midwife said to Paro, Ki lo chanashim hamitzriyot haivriot. The Jewish women are not like the Egyptian women. Maybe Egyptian women would do that, but we won't. Right? Ki chayot heina, we bring life. V'terem tavo lehem amyeled v'yaladu. When these women come to us, we let them give birth. Vayetev Elohim lamyaledet vayirev ha'am vayatzmu meod. God had to intercede and do good. In other words, bring a goodness to the miyaldot, because Paro was ready to, right? Only Hashem put something into Paro's head that somehow he doesn't punish them, right? And the Jewish people, they were fruitful, they multiplied tremendously. Vaiki aru hamyalodot Elohim. And it was because the midwives feared God. Vayas lahem batim, and he made for them houses, and Chazal give a beautiful explanation. Vaytzav Paro lechol amo lemor, and Paro commanded his nation, now kol ben hayilod hayeora tashlichu, any child who's born, throw him into the river. V'chol habat techayun, and any girl keep alive. By the way, this just shows you the cruelty of Paro. When was the decree to throw the boys into the river made? After the Miyaldot refused to do what Paro said. So when Paro told the Miyaldot, kill the Jewish babies, was it by throwing them into the river? No. It was totally cruel. In other words,
from the shoulder, like just when they come out to kill them.
Yeah. I mean, think about the cruelty of what Paro was asking these midwives to do. It wasn't the midwives weren't going to throw the children. They had to kill them right on the spot. Right?
I think even maybe before, it sounds like from before they're even born, because I think it's, from what I understood, the midwives are saying that the Jewish women are not like Egyptian women, that they already give birth before we come, so that's why we can't kill them.
Yes. Like, well, that was the excuse.
So, right, no, I know it's not true, but I'm saying, so to me that sounds like Paro was basically saying, while they're still in the stomach,
could be,
when they're about to come out, kill them.
But he did. But
so it's like a stillborn.
The problem is he wanted to know if it's a boy or a girl. So the assumption is that they had to be born. Right, he wanted to know, is it a boy or a girl?
They both feel cruel to me.
Yeah.
One doesn't feel better.
Of course, no. But I'm just saying that, in other words, Paro, like, to throw a child into, God forbid, but to throw a child into the river is not it's terrible, but to actually kill the child with your bare hands, God forbid, right? That's what he was asking the Miyaldot to do. Yeah. Only afterwards does he say to his own people, throw them into the river. Okay, in any case, this is the backdrop of Moshe Rabbeinu's birth. The backdrop to Moshe Rabbeinu's birth is danger, oppression, slavery. And this story here of Paro's decree is juxtaposed to the next pasuk, which is the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu, which should be source number 3 on your source sheet. Yes, what does it say? It says, "Vayelech ish mi Beit Levi," and a certain man from the house of Levi, "Vayikach et bat Levi," and he took the daughter of a Levite. "Vatara isha vatelet ben," and the woman became pregnant, and she gave birth to a such son. "Vatera oto ki tovu," and she saw that he was good. "Vatitzpeneu shlosha yerachim," and she managed to hide him for 3 months. The birth of Moshe is juxtaposed in the Torah to the decree of Paro that every Jewish boy throw into the river. Let's just think about this for a second. The danger of this, right? In other words, the mesirut nefesh that a Jewish woman will have to have in order to get pregnant, bring a child into the world, and put this child into danger. And Yocheved is courageously saying, I don't care. I don't care. In other words, Yocheved is a rebel. She's a rebel. That's who she is. She is going to rebel. And by the way, if we say that Yocheved is one of the midwives, even more so she's a rebel.
Yeah.
In other words, there's this rebellious kind of a personality trait that these Jewish women have, that they defy the order of Paro, and they say, we will have children despite the fact that maybe they will be put to death by the Egyptians. Okay?
So, where does it say Yocheved?
So by the way, we don't know afterwards. So at the
Okay.
beginning, that's a good point, by the way. At the beginning, the mother and the father are anonymous.
Yeah.
They are a man from the house of Levi takes a woman from the house of Levi. That is significant, by the way. Maybe we'll get to it in a moment. But in any case, the Midrash suggests that many Jews. So it's not a given that it was so easy to bring children into the world. It's not a given that that all Jews said, okay, we're going to have children, right? Just look at the Midrash, and this should be source number 4 for you. It's and it says like this. Here's what the Midrash says. So now we're into Midrash. By the way, up to now, we were basically Pshat. Basically, this is the storyline. Yeah. So now the Midrash says like this. And there went a man of the house of Levi and took a daughter of Levi. Where did he go? Why does it say Vayikach, right? Why does it Vayelech, right? Where did he go? Asked Rav Chisda bar Zvina. He went for the advice of his daughter. We are taught, this is a famous Midrash, Amram was considered the greatest man of his generation, and as soon as Paro decreed that every son who is born will be cast into the river, he said to himself, in vain do we get married. He therefore divorced his wife. Right? So it says that Amram, Moshe's parents, actually went through a divorce, right? Amram actually divorced his wife because he says, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna bring children into the world so they just be slaves, right? Thrown into the river, killed, right? So it says he therefore divorced his wife. The rest of the people followed his example, did likewise. So the Jews are now one after another. They are starting to divorce their wives according to the Midrash. Thereupon his daughter said to him, and this is what I quoted before. So his daughter Miriam said to him, right? I'm sorry, I missed something here. Father, your decree is even worse than Paro, for he issued a decree against the sons, but you have issued a decree against the sons and daughters. Yeah. Paro's decree affects merely this world, but your decree affects the world to come as well. There's no Olam Haba. Right? So he says, as to the decree of Paro, the wicked, whether it will endure or not, we don't know. But as far as yours, you are right. Your righteous decree will surely endure. Right? You're going to put an end to the Jewish people, and if thou decree a thing, it will be fulfilled unto thee. Right? He immediately remarried his wife, whereupon the rest of the people also remarried their wife. It wasn't a given that Jews were so quick to give to bring children into the world. So Yochevet's actions of doing this are very courageous, and also I would say they're very, very rebellious.
Miriam.
Okay.
You mean?
No, Yochevet, she had a child. Miriam for sure.
Miriam
The fact what Miriam did was totally rebellious. First of all, think about this. There's another midrash, I don't know if I've quoted over here, that she actually went to the Sanhedrin. Right? In other words, she went to the elders and she said before them all, what are you guys doing? Think about what it takes for a young Jewish girl to, first of all, wives, they're super rebellious. And they get caught red-handed by Paro. He comes and he says, why did you do this? Right? And then they have to make up a story over here, and then Hashem has to intervene and give them protection. And by the way, in the next source, so Rashi does tell us who Shifra and Pua are, right? Why are they called Shifra and Pua? So if you look at source number 5, Rashi says Shifra, this was Yocheved. She bore this additional name because she used to put the baby after its birth into good physical condition. So the word Shifra comes from the word Lishaper, from the word shofar, right? The word shofar, Shifra, shofar, right? Because what does a shofar do? When we hear the shofar, we have to improve. We improve ourselves, right? The shofar awakens us to improve. So Shifra would improve the child. The child was born, and then she would clean him up and make him nice and beautiful, right? And Pua, why was her name Pua? This is Miriam, and she bore this additional name because she used to call aloud and speak and croon. So the word like poo poo poo, right? Right? That was what she did, and so she was really Miriam, right? So think about what this Rashi is saying. These two women, the mother and the daughter, are so rebellious that they will do anything that they need to do in order to bring children into the world, to coo with them. What?
And for the Jewish people.
For the Jewish people, exactly, absolutely. So the point that I'm trying to make is that it's very significant that Moshe Rabbeinu is given by the daughter of Paro to his mother, and Vayigdal Hayeled, he grows up there for a couple of years, right? By the way, according to halacha, how long should a woman breastfeed, right? How long should a woman? Have you ever?
2 years.
So the optimal is 2 years, but Chazal say up to 4 years, up to 4 years, right?
4 years?
Up to 4
4
years.
years?
Chazal say, I don't know if women.
Milk in
If you keep doing, then you would. If you keep doing it, right? So I have no idea. I have heard stories of this, but the point that I'm trying to make is that Moshe Rabbeinu does grow up in formative years with his mother and his sister, and in that home of these rebellious individuals, and somehow it has an effect on he is going to have to be super rebellious. Moshe Rabbeinu is going to have a little. If he wants to be the leader of Am Yisrael to take them out of Egypt, he is going to have a little bit of, that kind of like edge to him, right? And I would suggest to all of you that he learns that from his mother during those years, from his sister during those years. Again, when he comes, the Jewish people say, "Go away! Leave us alone." Right? I mean, this is the Jewish people. So he's going to have a little bit of that quality. He's going to have that courage.
But also, I'm reluctant to say, like, it's intrinsic in him. Like, God really has to push it. He's like, oh, I have a stutter. Like,
Yes, yeah.
It's definitely not natural to him.
Yeah, it's not natural. It's not natural to him. By the way, so the word Moshe it's a very, very interesting word. Well, let's go on here a little bit. What was there a hand up over here? Did I see? Yeah.
Just about the divorce, and I didn't think marriage and divorce was going on back then. So where this midrash that says you divorce, and then you're not supposed to go back to the wife you divorced.
No, only if the wife remarries. If a man divorces his wife, and then she remarries, and then she gets a divorce from the second husband, she cannot return to her first husband.
No point, but that's halakha.
That's the halacha.
Okay.
Here, this is not what happened.
Ago.
No, here this does. Yeah, so it's a good question, and the assumption is that there were certain oral traditions that the Jewish people had. The Midrash, that's why the Midrash elaborates and kind of takes liberties. There's kind of like an assumption that there were certain halachot that were oral traditions that they had, and apparently, this is one of them, right? And so, was it a divorce according to the way we see it? In other words, we have it today. Was there a real get? And was there a sofer who wrote the get and everything? That I don't know. Okay, but by the way, probably most societies during that time probably had some system in place of marriage and divorce. There probably was something in place. I think that's a natural part of most societies. So, in any case. But that's the Midrash is definitely leading in that way. Okay, let's go on now to the name. Okay, so so we have now established, okay, that certainly Yocheved, Moshe's mother, had something to do with the formation of his personality during those first years. Let's now go to the daughter of Paro. What is her part in all of this? Right? What is her part in all? Well, let's go look at source number 6. Okay, let's go back to that pasuk. Vayigdal hayeled. So the boy grew up. Vativia lebat Paro. She brings him to the daughter of Paro. Vayila leben, and he was to her like a son. So there's no question that the daughter of Paro has a very important role to play here. He's like a son to her. But more than that, Vatikra shemo Moshe. She calls his name Moshe. Right? Why? Kimin hamayim mishitihu. So first of all, biblical names are very, very important. Okay, they're very, very important. Moshe is not named by his biological mother. He is named by, I guess, let's call her his adopted mother. Okay, so he has this dual parenthood. He has this shared parenthood, right? And the name of Moshe is very significant. So we said the pshat of the name is why? Because you drew me out from the water. But just think for a second, the word Moshe, I'm going to test your Hebrew over here, okay? What else does that name sound like? Moshe. Anything else? Can you kind of like put that name Moshe? Let me keep saying the word Moshe. Moshe, Moshe, Moshe. Put a chet in there. Maybe if you put a chet in there. Mashiach. Yeah, Mashiach. So the word Moshe can also come from the word, right? Because you're a Chabadnik, right? So the word Moshe can also come from the word Moshiach, the Redeemer. It's not, and by the way, it's all connected. In other words, because you drew me out from the water, but you're also a Moshiach. What is it? What is a Moshiach? A Moshiach is going, like she took Moshe out of the water. What is Moshe Rabbeinu going to do? He's going to take the Jewish people out of Egypt, and he's going to cross a body of water, right? So it all makes sense here. Listen to what the Sforno says. The Sforno is source 6a. Sforno says, "Vatikra shemo Moshe." She named him Moshe, someone who will save others by pulling them out of their calamity. Right? So there's a tremendous symbolism in the daughter of Paro pulling Moshe Rabbeinu out of the water, because that's what Moshe Rabbeinu is going to do. He is literally going to pull the Jewish people out of Egypt, and it's going to be the end, the final part of it is going to be Moshe Rabbeinu taking the Jewish people through the sea. Right, literally out of the water.
We learned a thing that actually in Egyptian his name wasn't Moshe; it was like Masusis.
Yes,
it's something else, but the Hebrew translation is Moshe.
Moshe, that's right, that's correct. Yeah. So Paro's daughter also has a very strong input in the formation of the personality of Moshe, because when you give someone a name, you're giving them also their personality. In other words, Moshe, you will be the Redeemer. So now he's got two qualities that go hand in hand. He's going to be chutzpahdik, he's going to be courageous, he is going to be a rebel, but he's also going to be, because all those qualities are going to be the qualities that are required to be a Moshe, a Moshiach, a Redeemer, right? And so what's interesting about all of this is that both women have a role to play in Moshe Rabbeinu's personality, okay, who he is going to be. Let's keep going over here. And so there's a dual role, okay. Moshe Rabbeinu is unique in that he's raised by two women. He's raised by two women, his mother on one hand, but also the daughter of Paro on the other. If you look at source number, where are we here? 1 second. Source number 7. Which is the Emek Davar. The Emek Davar says the following. Emek Davar, Ruchaim Volozhin says, and he became a son unto her. Remember, the Torah says that she returned her to the daughter of Paro, and then then Moshe became like a son to the daughter of Paro. And he became a son unto her. Since she saved him from death and also raised him, it was considered as though she had given birth to him. And she says, and she called him Moshe, and I've seen written in the name of Rav Shmuel of Bohemia that in Egyptian language, you were talking about this, right? This word in this form means a son, right? So there's a little bit of an interesting twist to it. And this interpretation is correct. Thus she explains the reason why the child is hers. For I drew him out of the waters, for it is as if he drowned in the river, and so his father and mother have no portion in him, and I am the mother of the child. This is truly called acquiring a person. Think about that symbolism, by the way. In other words, to the daughter of Paro, Moshe is his son. And how is a child born? Well, Baruch Hashem, I've had 7 children, and I know that my wife is close to giving birth. In each one of those 7 births, when her waters broke. Right? In fact, one of our children was born. Actually, one of our children was actually born in Phoenix, and I had to rush my wife to the hospital. And I was driving the car, and her waters broke in the back. They broke in the back seat, and she literally. I pulled up right to the hospital. And then her waters broke in the back seat. It was a real mess, right? I had to clean it, of course. But in any case, they opened the door of the hospital. There was a room right in there. She went in, and boom, right? So it was like really. So think about that symbolism. He's my son, says the daughter of Paro. And how does birth take place? The waters break. She takes him out of the water.
Wow.
All of this is very, very symbolic in terms of what's going on here. So, and this is what the Netziv of Volozhin says. This is what the Emek Davar says. In other words, she is now the mother, and she actually symbolically goes through certain aspects of birth. Maybe it's not her water, but it's the water of. By the way, the Nile in Egypt was known to be a god of fertility. So it's significant. We have to assume that's the river that he's being pulled out of. Okay. So in any case, this is very, very significant. So now Moshe Rabbeinu is being raised in Egypt. So we saw step number 1. He's being raised by his mother for a number of years because she's breastfeeding him, and he is learning by osmosis her tremendous courage and everything. And now he's going to be raised in Egypt. And listen to what the Ibn Ezra says. Okay? Why is it that Moshe Rabbeinu now, so he needs another step in his education process. And that step is going to be now raised in an Egyptian home. Step number 1 was being raised in a Jewish home. Now it's going to be raised in an Egyptian home, says the Ibn Ezra. The thoughts of God are deep. Who can perceive his secrets? To him alone the plot is clear. Perhaps God caused it to come about that Moshe would grow up in the royal palace, that his soul might be habituated, right, to be on the highest level, not lowly, and accustomed to be in the house of slaves. So somehow Moshe Rabbeinu needs to break away from the slaves of Egypt, which is the Jews, and somehow be raised in some royalty, and that too will be part of who he will be as a redeemer, right? For we do not see that he kills the Egyptian for performing an act of unjust violence, and do we not see that he kills the Egyptian for performing an act of unjust violence? Right? He grows up in a palace, and he's going to learn certain values there as well. And he saves the Midianite daughters from the shepherds, for they perform unjust violence in watering their flocks from the water, right? And moreover, had he grown up amongst his brethren, such that they had known him since his youth, they would not be in awe of him, for they would consider him as one of them. But I would like to say more. I'd like to say more than this. And that is, think about the act of the daughter of Paro. Think about what she does. Why does she save Moshe? Her father is the one who made the decree. Her father is the one who made the decree, and we have to assume that any Egyptian who would save a Jew, it's off with your head. So if there was ever a rebellious woman in Shemot, it is the daughter of Paro. She rebels against all of Egypt. She's an Egyptian princess, and she rebels against her own father, and she saves the child. Of course it's a Jewish child. I mean, everybody knows. By the way, it says that she knew he was an Israeli. Yeah. Right? By the way, Chazal, the Ramban over there, says that she saw that he had a Brit Milah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, for sure it makes sense. And by the way, that in itself is Yocheved, right? Giving a Brit Milah, so that's a Mesirut Nefesh. It's dangerous, right? The act of the daughter of Paro is an act of unbelievable chesed, unbelievable justice. Why would she save Moshe? Because she understands how dangerous and how wrong and how unjust her father's decree is. How do you throw a little baby into the river who's just born, who's not done nothing wrong? There can't be anything that's more unjust than that. Moshe Rabbeinu understands from his own mother, in other words, his adopted mother, the importance of justice. Why does he save the Jew who's being struck by an Egyptian? Why does he save Tzipporah at the well when the other shepherds come and they start to abuse her and so on? Right? Where did he get this sense of justice? So comes along the Ibn Ezra and he says he didn't get that from his home, because the slaves, that's a totally different mentality. He gets it from the time that he's now being raised by the daughter of Paro. She teaches him that to be a real Moshiach, not only must you be rebellious, not only must you be courageous, not only you have to have all of this chutzpahdik personality, but you have to stand for justice. You have to be an individual who, even when it puts you in danger, right? Even when it puts you in danger. So I think that this is a very, very important part to see here. Let's just go on. Source number 12. I'm sorry. Source number 10 for you. Yeah, because that scene is very significant. Vateret bat Paro lirchotz ala yeor, and the daughter of Paro goes to wash on the river. Venarotel chot al yad hayeor, and her maidens are walking with her. Vateret hateva betoch hasuf, and she sees this basket in the river. By the way, just think about the hashgacha pratit of this. There's a very interesting, I can't remember who says this, maybe it's the Or HaChaim. The Or HaChaim says, what's the difference between so it's called a teva, right? Generally speaking, how do we say the word a boat in Hebrew?
Sirah.
A sirah. In Hebrew, a sirah, or if it's a bigger boat, we would say an oniyah, right? So one of the commentaries, I can't remember who says this, says, what's the difference between a teva? And by the way, where else do we have the word teva?
No.
Noach, right? Noach. So one of the commentators, I'll dig this up for you, says, what's the difference between a teva and a sirah or a oniyah? A sirah, a boat, has oars. It has a rudder. You steer it. Mm-hmm. You can tell it where to go. A teva has no oars and no rudders. It just goes by itself. So who steers the teva? Hashem. Only God can steer the teva. The teva of Noach was being steered by God. The teva of Moshe is being steered by Hashem. And Hashem does it such, so Hashem is the oars, Hashem is the rudder, and it goes exactly where it has to go. It goes right to the door. I mean, think about, like, if you had to put money down, right? Well, if there were two Jews gambling on the side of the river when Yocheved put the teva into the river, and these two Jews were saying, where is it going to go? And he says, I'll bet you $100 it's going to go right to the daughter of Paro. That guy would say, you're on, I'll give you 10 times I'll give you 10 to 1 odds. Okay? 10 to 1 odds. But no, so but HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes it such that it goes, why? Because this is where he has to be. If he's going to be the Redeemer, he's got to go to the daughter of Paro, because there's something very significant that he can learn from her that will make him into the Redeemer. So let's just go on. So it says, and the maidens were walking on the river. She sees the teva in the river. She sends one of her maidens to take the teva. There's a chazal on that. She opens it and she sees the child. And she sees that he is crying. And she has compassion over this child. There is no question that he is a Jewish child. And again, I say to myself, imagine what is running through the daughter of Paro's mind at this moment. This is a Jewish boy. He's circumcised. She knows he's a Hebrew. Her father made a command that every single Jewish boy has to be thrown into the river and put to death. She is not exempt from that command. Adarabba, she is the daughter. If she doesn't do it, imagine what that's going to mean for all of Egypt. When that word gets out that even the daughter of Paro defied him, everybody's going to defy Paro. That's how rebellious she is over here by going against her father. And we have to assume that probably most people who would get caught doing this would be put to death. Remember, Hashem has to intervene to save Pua and Shifra from Paro, right? So her act of saving Moshe Rabbeinu, it tells us a lot about her character. It tells us a lot about who she was and what kind of a she stands for justice, right? She has compassion, right? This is who she is, and this is what Moshe Rabbeinu is going to learn from her, and that's why the very first acts of Moshe Rabbeinu are justice, compassion. he sees an Egyptian hitting one of his fellow Jews, he intervenes, even though he knows how much he has to lose from all that. He sees at the well, right? That is what he's going to do. And so what we see over here is that he has this tremendous influence from two women, right? His mother on one hand and the daughter of Paro from the other. A final word on the daughter of Paro, because when we look at her and we look at Chazal, something very, very interesting. She, by the way, she remains in our text of Shmot. Do we ever know what her name is? Do we ever know what her name is? No. She is only known as Bat Paro. But do we know what her name actually was? Batya, right? And how do we know that? So there's a pasuk in Chronicles in Divrei Hayamim, right? And it says like this, and this is a really an interesting pasuk. V'ishto haYehudiya, and his Jewish wife, by the way, it's not clear who we're talking about here, but we're going to see this in a second. And his Jewish wife, Yalda et Yered, gave birth to Yered, Avi Gedor, the father of Gedor, Vet Chever, and Chever Avi Shocho, right? These are genealogies. Vet Yekutiel Avi Zanoach, and Yekutiel the father of Zanoach, Ve'ele b'nei Bitya bat Paro. And these are the children of Bitya, later called Batya, but it's really Bitya, the daughter of Paro, Asher Lakach Mered, who was taken by her husband, who is who? Mered. What does the word Mered mean in Hebrew?
To go down?
No, that's Laredet, that's Yored. Mered is a rebellion. So the daughter of Paro marries a Jewish man whose name is Mered, rebellion. This is who she is. She's a rebellious woman, right? That's who she is. And who is this Mered? Listen to what Rashi on Divrei Hayamim says. Source number 12. Source number 12. Rashi says, Rashi says, who Mered married. Who is Mered? Kalev. Who is Kalev?
One of the Meraglim.
One of the Meraglim. But which one of the Meraglim is he? One of the good ones. Yeah. There's Kalev and Yehoshua, right? And by the way, who are these Meraglim? Rebels. They're rebels. They go against the other 12, right? So that's why he got his name Mered, right? So he says, who married Kalev is Mered, who rebelled Shemarad against the counsel of the spies, and so is the manner of the genealogy, that even for one, he says the sons of Like and the sons of Elah Uknaz. Anyway, that's
He must have been so old, because the 12 people were sent so much later on, and that's Moshe's
but during the time in Egypt, Kalev is probably young. He marries the daughter of Paro. At that time, he's probably young.
And I'm saying, when the 12 spies are sent, Moshe's already... the spies are sent a few years after the Exodus. It's just, 2 years after the Exodus. Then they have to wander for 40. So Moshe sends his adopted father. Almost. Not really.
His
adopted mother's husband.
Yes, very good. Exactly. But this is a remarkable Divrei Hayamim and Rashi over here, because it really kind of like ties the whole thing together. Again, what is it that Moshe learns from the house of Paro, from the daughter of Paro, right? Also rebellion, justice. This is what he learns. Kalev represents those we can understand. I mean, they're very similar. And so Bitya is a woman, she's a rebel, she goes against her father, but she's also a woman of justice. Like, these are all the things that she learns. And by the way, there's something else that we should have picked up from this, and that is that she eventually becomes Jewish.
Yeah. In
other words, that is the biggest rebellion of all. Okay? In other words, like, imagine the daughter of the Pope, right? Imagine one day the daughter of the Pope shows up to Midreshet Beirot Bat Ayin. Okay? Imagine one day the daughter of the Pope, she comes in and she's...
One of my friends also, like, her father is a bishop. And then she converted to Jews.
We actually had a...
She lived in India.
We actually had a student over here.
Yeah,
that's interesting. We had a student here many years ago, and she became really religious. Her father was an Anglican minister, but it turns out that her father was actually Jewish. Wow. Her mother was not. and the father actually was born to a Jewish mother, and whatever, he assimilated and became an Anglican minister somewhere in the south, in North Carolina or something like that, and she came back to become a Jewish woman, right? That's
What's
like
her
the
name?
I forget her name now. Probably my wife would remember.
Does she live in Yerushalayim now?
She might. She
Part
might
of
live in
the story? I
Yerushalayim.
heard her story.
It could be. She might live in Yerushalayim. But in any case, this is the daughter of Paro. She's raised in the palace of the king. By the way, just think about what she's giving up over here. She's raised in the palace of a king in royalty. She has like the most beautiful home in the world.
also giving it up.
Well, she's also giving it up for sure, right? She gives it up to go with slaves, to wander for 40 years in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Like, what? That's crazy, right? So listen to what the Gemara says, and this is the last source on your sheet. It's 13. Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. Amai kari la Yehudiya. Remember the verse in Chronicles says, if you just go back, it says Vishto ha-Yehudiya, his Jewish wife. So why is she called a Jewish wife? Al shum shekafra ba'avodah zara, because she denied, she went against all of our idolatry. Dichtivat. Now, this is a very fascinating midrash. Where did she convert? When did she convert? By the way, in order for a person to convert to Judaism, what do they have to do? What? They got to go to mikvah. They could learn all the halachas. They could be like scholars, a Talmid Chacham or a Torah scholarist, whatever. If there's such a word, is there a word as scholarist? I don't think so. In any case, in other words, they could know everything. But if they don't dunk in the mikvah, nothing doing. The conversion is not a conversion. They have to dunk in the mikvah in front of a Beit Din. So where was Bat Paro's mikvah?
The Nile.
And when?
When she came to get Moshe, what?
Oh, listen
but
to
that's
it.
so
Yeah,
rude.
listen to what it
And
says.
he would have been able to nurse from her.
Al shum shekapra avodah. No, she's not. She didn't give birth. She didn't have milk. Dichtiv vateret bat paro lirchotz ala yor. It says the daughter of Paro is going to bathe in the river, and then she sees the child. What was she going to bathe? What? She's just going for a swim. The daughter of Paro says, Vama Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, she arda lirchotz megilulei beit avia. She went to dunk from the idolatry of the home of her father. He's suggesting over here. By the way, Rabbi Yochanan is interesting because Rabbi Yochanan, his study partner was a guy named Reish Lakish. And how did he meet Reish Lakish? Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan was bathing in a river. And he left his clothing at the side of the river. And Reish Lakish at that time was a gangster.
Yeah.
And he went to steal his clothing. Right? He went to steal his clothing, and Rabbi Yochanan said, "Hey, what are you doing?" Right? And Rabbi Yochanan was extremely, extremely handsome. So Reish Lakish, who was a really mischievous guy, whatever, he said to Rabbi Yochanan, he said, "Who are you?" He finds out he's a big Torah scholar. So he says to him, he says, because he saw that he was really a handsome guy.
No,
He said,
in the beginning he thought he was a woman from the set.
yes, he thought he was a woman from the. He thought he was a woman. He had long hair and
Long
everything.
hair.
Yeah. So, but then he realizes he's a man, and he says, "What are you wasting your time with Torah? You should use that beauty. You should use for women." That's what he says to him. So Rabbi Yochanan says to him, "Well, you should use your wisdom for Torah. I see that you're very, very intelligent. You should use your wisdom for Torah." And then he says, "If you think I'm handsome, you should see my sister. My sister is even more beautiful than me. And if you do tshuva, I will give you my sister in marriage." And that's what happened. And so Reish Lakish did tshuva, and he became the greatest Torah scholar of his time with Rabbi Yochanan. So it's significant that Rabbi Yochanan is saying that the daughter of Paro in the river is doing a metamorphosis, and now that's where she's dunking and becoming a Jewish woman, right? And she is now, yes, she already understands where she wants to be. So that's very, very powerful. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, she is like this remarkable. And by the way, the word bitya, right, in Hebrew, you said batya, which means the daughter of God. So that is so important that she raises Moshe. Hashem directs the teva, the ark, to this Egyptian woman, because this Egyptian woman is going to be the one who is going to teach Moshe Rabbeinu what it means to be a redeemer, what it means to change your whole self completely, right? And to be a rebel, to be rebellious against her own father and her own society, and that's what you're going to have to be, Moshe Rabbeinu. So I think this is very important in our parsha. It's very important that Moshe Rabbeinu is raised by two women And each one of these two women have something to give, right? They have something to give Moshe Rabbeinu in terms of his personality, so that he will be now worthy of being the redeemer of the Jewish people. And the word Moshe means to be taken out, but it also means to take out, as the Ibn Ezra said, right? To be a Moshiach as well. So I think there's a lot going on here. This is, I mean, I could have chosen a million things in this parsha to talk about, but I think, Moshe, this sets the tone of the rest of the book of Shemot, because Moshe is going to be, from now on, he is the main character of the entire Torah, not just in the book of Shemot, but in Vayikra, Bamidbar, Dvarim, he's going to be, so we get a little insight into who he was. Okay, we will end with that. Yeah, comments.
So
Thank you everyone for watching on Zoom. What?
When Moshe comes back, where's Mama? They not.
She's still there.
Where's the drawing? It's not.
You have words
in
of
the
drawing.
Torah.
We don't have a lot. Yeah, there's nothing recorded about her role. There is recorded about Miriam, right? So we know Miriam is very active. She's very involved when Moshe Rabbeinu
Babe, do you see
returns.
my pink
But the mother and father, they kind of drop off.
clean up here yesterday?
And so, is it ever in the Torah about Pharaoh being?
About what?
I
I
remember
guess
somebody using it
Pharaoh's
for
daughter, so
the
the grandfather, Saba.
sign
No,
bonus
no.
thing.
That's about the. That's
I never read it.
the. Yeah, that's
But
the end of it.
like,
Thank you everyone on
here.
Zoom for
Like we were
joining
here.
us.
Thank you.